Welcome to Richplanet TV. I'm Richard D. Hall. Now, as you might know, over the past year and a bit, I've taken time out to work on making myself less dependent on the grid, or the system as I'm going to call it. This is sometimes referred to as self-sufficiency. A lot of people have been asking me about it, so today I've decided to report on what I've been doing. I've been hesitant to report on this because it gives a window into my personal life, but I've decided it's worth reporting on in order to encourage more people to try and detach themselves from the government and corporate system, which is demonstrably being run by criminals. Why would you want to be dependent on a system run by criminals? It's important that large numbers of people opt out of the system so that those numbers can trade with each other and provide a diverse market of food and essential items for living. After this show, I am sure I will get some great ideas back from viewers on how to improve off-grid living, which I can then report on to hopefully benefit everyone. So firstly, why did I decide to attempt this? Well, if you watch my work on the scamdemic, this shows beyond any doubt that we are under a global dictatorship. The appearance of this scamdemic and the blatant evidence that it was all planned in advance. We've got Event 201. This was the New World Order raising its ugly head. And the measures that they implemented across the world were so ubiquitous. 85% of countries just followed all of the ridiculous rules and measures. So those 85% of countries are just in lockstep, right, under one power. And the remaining 15%, some of them have been taken to task over this. So this was a visible demonstration that there is ostensibly an invisible New World Order government in charge, and we cannot trust this system. The level of deceit in this scamdemic has shown that you cannot trust the system, and it's not being run by the government of your own country. So that's why I decided to take these measures in the spring of 2020. Now at that time, three things happened in my life. The first thing that happened to me is I managed to pay off my mortgage on my property. So I'm fully mortgage free now. Shortly after that, my mother died, and then shortly after that, that's when the scamdemic started. That's when lockdown started. And these all had an impact on what I'm going to show you today. Now, all of us, or the vast majority of us, depend on the system I'm going to describe. And by system, I don't just mean your government, I mean corporations as well. Now, let's first spell out what are the needs that this system provides. This is similar to the hierarchy of needs in psychology, where you list the most sought after needs first, your most basic needs. All right, so your most basic need is for safety, is to protect your life. So you might think that protection is a fundamental need. So that would be your home or your shelter. All right, so I've listed that one first. High up on the hierarchy of needs is water, the need for water. If you don't have water or fluids for a few days, you're going to be in a bad way. So we all need water to survive. The next need that I've listed is food. You couldn't live for many weeks without eating food. The next one I've listed, perhaps not absolutely essential, depending on where you are in the world, I suppose, is energy. And I'm going to look at electricity, gas, and solid fuel. I realise that there are other types of energy generation. Clothing, again, depending on where you are in the world, this could be an essential item. I've now listed communications, which clearly we're getting into less essential items here, but you'd be forgiven for thinking that communication is essential in this day and age, the way that people are addicted to the internet and addicted to their phones. We then have employment. So the system gives you employment and in return for that, you give the system your labour. And then we have money, which is a complicated one. I've covered that a lot in the past on Richplanet. I'm going to go through these needs and comment on each one of them and show what I've attempted in order to free myself from the system, the criminal system, which is providing those needs. Now, this is merely what I've attempted, all right? It's work in progress. It's how I've muddled my way through it with limited resources and the limited knowledge that I have, all right? So I'm not saying that any of what I'm doing is necessary, or there will definitely be shortages or inflation or recession or financial collapse. I am saying that we cannot trust this system that's providing our needs because it's run by criminals, and the level of uncertainty about the system is through the roof. Anything is possible. They could do anything to us at this point. That's why we have to abstain from this system. I'm not saying that this is the right thing to do. It was what felt right for me to do. I'm not saying everyone should copy this. Perhaps you might like to take some of my ideas and use them in your own project. Add your own ideas, which will perhaps benefit you and your family. Now, at the start, back in the spring of 2020, my motives for doing this were about protecting myself against an engineered financial collapse. But now, although I still think the engineered financial collapse will happen, it's more about protecting against the new monetary system and social control system that is being planned, along with the removal of cash from the economy. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please wake up and watch previous Richplanet shows number 286, 287 and 288. Now, some people who go off-grid, they do it in an absolute way. So they will find somewhere in the middle of nowhere and they will use what's around them to try and build a hut and then start using the local resources. Now, and you'll find people who've done that. Now, for me, that was too much of a hurdle. I'm 53 years old and I chose to do it with my own property, as I'm going to show you. To me, building my own property in the middle of nowhere, that was way beyond my scope and capability, right? So I've decided to focus on my own property. So that's what this project is about. How do I turn my own property into something which is going to help me get off the grid and get detached from the system? So let's now look at each need in turn and see whether we can meet those needs without the system. So we start with the home or the shelter. This is a very difficult issue because of the whole subject of home ownership is a political hot potato. Quite simply, if you don't have home ownership, then you are dependent on the system. So if you're paying rent to the system. If you've got a mortgage, you're paying mortgage to a financial institution, which is part of the system. Now, most of what I'm going to describe is achievable if you've got your own home. You'd struggle to do what I'm going to show you if you're living in a rented property, unless you've got a very lenient landlord. Now, a side note here, I'm not advocating the current debt-based monetary system and usury. I'm against usury and hence I'm against interest-based mortgages. The monetary system could be redesigned so that you can purchase a house without paying any interest. So merely by accepting a mortgage, you are engaging in a rigged system. You're tying yourself to the system in order to free yourself in 25 years' time. That's why building your own property is a better solution, but let's continue down the path of doing it the usual way. Now, there are approximately 29 million homes in the UK. 37% of those are fully paid for, right? So they're disconnected from the system. 28% are owned but have mortgages, and 34% are in the rented sector. We could also look at this graph and see that most people who do own their homes outright are over the hill. So the time in most people's lives when they've got the energy to carry out a self-sufficiency project with their home is when they're living in rented housing. So that's a problem. So just over a third of the population would struggle to implement what I'm going to talk about today because they're in the rented sector, unless, as I said, you've got a lenient landlord. Now, there are a lot of property programs on TV about buying and developing homes. They are designed to encourage people to take on as much debt as possible. What they do is fuel people's greed and desires. They never focus on what is realistically achievable to the average person. They always feature properties which are outside the reach of most people, usually £200,000 upwards. They are disgusting and they are not helpful at all. They are there to psychologically make you want more and make you take on debt. Now, it wasn't an easy journey for me to get to the point where I'm at now. I did it on a fairly low budget. So I think my own journey in terms of the financial burden might be very useful for people to look at who want to own a property but are still living in rented property. I'm going to go through some of my own figures to illustrate that you don't need to earn a lot of money to be able to get your own property. And the last place you want to be getting advice from is your television set. I'm going to give some approximate figures and dates here from my own struggle. I'm going to start in 2007. I bought a property in Gateshead. I believe I paid, I think it was 94,000, and I had a mortgage of 75,000, which was interest only. In 2007, it was much easier to get a mortgage. So I paid that mortgage for 8 years without paying off any capital, just interest. Now in 2015, I decided to relocate to South Wales. I sold the Gateshead property for £87,000 and paid the interest-only mortgage off in full. I didn't try and transfer that mortgage to another property. So that left me with £12,000. I also had £12,000 in savings that I had saved over the previous 10 years. So I came to Wales with £24,000 in my hand for a deposit for a house. And my average net earning over the previous 3 years, which is what they base their mortgage decisions on, was only £7,500 a year. Most lenders will loan you 4 times your salary, which would only be £30,000 in my case. This means I needed to get a property for under £54,000. Now, a note here about tax credits. If you're on tax credits, they do add the tax credits to your net annual earning when they're considering giving you a mortgage. So your income that the bank would consider might be higher than you think. Now, I put a number of offers in on properties for sale in Merthyr Tydfil. One of them was this one. It had been on the market for over £70,000 and had been reduced, I think, to somewhere in the mid-60s. It was 60-odd thousand pounds. I put an offer in for £40,000, which was rejected. So I upped the offer to £52,000, which was accepted. I then had to apply for a £28,000 mortgage, which was rejected. It was rejected because my credit rating had been affected by a £20 unpaid mobile phone bill from 2006. Cut a long story short, I wasn't actually liable for that bill because I had cancelled the contract at the end of the term, but the phone company renewed the contract by mistake. Despite this, in order to get the mortgage, I had to contact O2, pay the £20 bill from over 9 years ago. Then once this had been done, eventually, and it took some time, I was offered a £28,000 mortgage over a 20-year term. And bear in mind that I was 47 years old at the time. The interest rate was 2.75% fixed for 5 years. So there you go. It is possible to get a property if you're on a low income. I've put that information out to show this, right? That it is possible. If you've not got any savings and want to buy a property, you need to be disciplined and get a deposit together, right? You have to learn how to become a miser. I'm a pretty good miser. and I do know a few who are much better misers than I am. The house I bought was an old 3-storey property with a large kitchen in the basement, 2 reception rooms and 3 bedrooms. It had many issues that needed sorting out. 3 of the wooden lintels above the windows were completely rotten and needed replacing with concrete ones. So this tree is actually growing out of the side of the house. You can see it there. So we need to get rid of that. I replaced the floorboards. A large part of the roof needed refitting. Once I'd moved in 2015, every year after that in the spring, I spent about 6 weeks working on different aspects of the property. Financially, my aim was to try and pay the £28,000 mortgage off in 5 years by making overpayments. Between 2015 and 2020, my average annual earning went up to just over £10,000 a year. And out of this, I was able to make £3,000 or £4,000 in overpayments to the mortgage each year. I achieved the goal, and in the spring of 2020, I paid off the mortgage in full. Not long after this, my mother died, and some months later, I was left some of her estate in an inheritance. So I was able to carry out further improvements, as you will see in the video. I hope this has inspired those who are frustrated with renting and shown that it is possible to find a way to get your own property. Let's come on to the next need that the system provides, which is water. Okay, I'm in the living room, and this is on the middle level of the property, the middle level of 3 levels, and below me is the kitchen. Now, if you want to provide your own water, the most obvious place to get it from is from the roof when it rains. And I thought that because my kitchen's on the lowest level, it might be easy to capture the water on the middle level and feed it through down into the kitchen. So on the side of the living room here is a small side patio which has a drain pipe on it. I'm standing on the side patio. This is a shared area with my neighbour's property, and so this drain pipe here collects water from the roof, and as you can see, I've fitted a diverter. So what this does is water which comes vertically downwards, it will divert it through this pipe into the water butt, which is just a container, 250 litres I think this is, and then when the water butt gets full with rainwater, the water just then diverts over the filter, goes round the filter, and it goes down the drain. So there is a little mesh filter in here where you will get gunge and moss and what have you just gathers there, so that doesn't actually go into the water. It's not it's only the larger particles that this mesh will stop, but it keeps the water reasonably clean, right? And what you find is that when the tank is full, over time any dirt that's in the water will just settle at the bottom, right? So every now and again you can clean that out. I haven't had to clean it out yet, and it's been here for quite some months. And in order to try and keep the temperature down in summer months, I've painted it white, which helps just keep the temperature. You put your hand on there, it's summer now, it's pretty cold. Because I have been warned that if the temperature gets up beyond a certain level, you can have a problem with Legionnaire's disease, apparently. I haven't had any problems yet. So at the bottom of the water butt, this is MDPE piping. I've drilled a hole in there, fitted the MDP piping. It's quite easy to put together, and then there's a valve so you can isolate this from the house if you want, from outside, just in case there's any issues. If there was a flood or whatever, I'd be able to turn that blue tap off and then no water would come in. After the blue tap, there's a coupler which converts this plastic MDPE piping into copper. I think it's 1-inch pipe. And then there's a little filter there which you can change the mesh in. So there's a mesh that the water goes through, which will stop some of the larger particles before they go into the house. Where you put this determines how long the pipe's got to be, and you need to put this higher than wherever the level is that you're going to extract the water from. So this was the best place that judged for the water butt, which did mean there's going to be quite a long pipe to reach the kitchen sink. I'll show you that in a minute. And I had to get it through this wall. You can see there the copper pipe just going into the wall there, and it took us quite some time to drill through this wall. It's about 3 feet thick. We were on for quite a while, and as you can see, I've got insulation on there. That's to stop the water freezing in winter. So obviously with this system, because the tank is only just a little bit higher than the kitchen, you haven't got a lot of pressure pushing the water through the pipe. So I've added this stand here, which gives you an extra foot of height. It just gives it that little bit extra push to get the water through. Because obviously mains water pressure is much higher than something like this. So just have a look inside now, and the lid comes off quite easy, keeps any bugs out or what have you. You take it out. You give us a tenner, I'd drink that. I think it'd be all right. So we got a few 100 litres in there. As it's raining outside, I'll just show the water coming into the water butt. In comes the water. Hooray! So this is the living room, and I'll just pan across and notice there's no television in this living room. If you value your health, I recommend you do not have a television in your living room. Alright, so let's just zoom in. This is where the pipe comes through the wall. That's a copper pipe that I've just painted white, and you can see it just runs along the side wall below the radiator, and it goes down through into the kitchen. So I just drilled a hole in the ceiling through above where the kitchen sink was going to go, because I've rebuilt the kitchen as well. If you're wondering what this picture is, it's a landscape, and I've added a TR-3B on there, which is a secret spacecraft. There's a magnet on the other side of it, and you can move it about.